Gosh, Adrian, do you really think it's a good idea to start our podcast with Led Zeppelin, a band that has been discussed to death? I mean, do we really have any original thoughts to share?
No, probably not, but that's okay because they didn't either.
Fair enough. Well, we're talking Led Zeppelin, and it's coming up next on the world's most courteous show, Courtesy Listen. Welcome to Courtesy Listen.
The podcast that explores an artist's entire catalog
We'll listen to every studio album,
and any other essential recordings.
sharing our thoughts along the way.
Some of those albums will be good,
And some will be bad, but they all deserve.
a courtesy listen.
Well, thanks for joining us for our inaugural episode of Courtesy Listen. My name's Tom,
I'm Adrian.
and Adrian and I have been friends for over a decade, and both music fans, and we both have enjoyed sharing musical opinions with one another over those years.
Absolutely. Tom, how do you think our musical opinions overlap?
You know, I think we share many of the same favorite bands. I think we have different perspectives on music as a whole. I think over the years you've been more open and accepting to different types of music than perhaps I was earlier in our friendship. But I would hope that over the years I've become a bit more open-minded, largely through your influence and your example.
More courteous, if you will.
Exactly. Right? Yes, and we could not have done this podcast 10 years ago because I just was not courteous enough of a listener back then.
No. We've had plenty of times back and forth where we have sent each other, just this week, right? Send a Spotify link. And well, I am not going to listen to this ever again, but I will absolutely give it a courtesy listen. So, for sure.
Yes, and I like to think we hold true even when we look at it and we're like, oh gosh, I'm gonna hate this, but like you said, we do give it the courtesy listen. The last track that I sent you was a song by the band Corrosion of Conformity, which I'm sure that one just jumped off the page and you were like, yes, finally.
Yeah.
And I believe the last thing you sent me.
Sooner? Yeah, no. Oh gosh, last thing I sent you, I couldn't tell you.
Probably a Pedro the Lion song.
Oh, probably, yeah. That actually, I think that sounds about right with the recent show that I went to. So, awesome. Let's see. Today we are talking about Led Zeppelin. Tom, were you introduced to Led Zeppelin? Have you been a lifelong fan, recent fan? What do you think? Or even a fan at all? Maybe not. Maybe not a Led Zeppelin fan.
I do like Led Zeppelin. I would not call myself a massive fan of Led Zeppelin. I like their music. I did not hear Led Zeppelin until I was probably 15 years old. My parents, that was not a band that my parents listened to growing up, and we did not listen to classic rock radio or anything like that. And I really had no means of listening to Led Zeppelin until I made friends who listened to that kind of music, and then I'll reveal what my first album was when we get to it. But I have a couple of thoughts on Led Zeppelin. The first, I think, that was lost on me when I was younger was these guys were not really cool by the standard of 70s rock bands. They were cool in that they became like these rock gods, if you will, but they weren't like the Rolling Stones. I mean, they were singing about elves and dwarves and things like that.
Like quoting Tolkien, like
Dungeons and Dragons type stuff.
Right.
And so I think that wasn't something that I really made sense of until I was older.
Right. Well, now you hear about Led Zeppelin and you think this is one of the biggest rock bands of all time, and you just assume that it was like that from day one.
Yeah. And I have more thoughts too, but let me hear you first, your initial thoughts. When did you come to discover Led Zeppelin, and what are your overall feelings on them?
I like rock music. If you had to ask me what my favorite genre is, it's rock, all these different types of rock music. And so I think I've always kind of like enjoyed Led Zeppelin, but never like a big, strong, listened to them a lot, would consider myself a fan. until maybe the past 5 or 6 years where I've really learned more of the catalog and I have my favorite songs, and it's something that I'll put on if I, that's something that I'll actually like choose to listen to in my day-to-day life. So yeah, definitely, I would consider myself a Led Zeppelin fan. Now there are also tracks that I'm just like absolutely not, no. So a fan, but with some caveats.
Yeah. Were you aware of Led Zeppelin when you were a child?
Maybe, I don't know. That's such an interesting question because I think, it's hard to look back and kind of know what
Yeah.
Probably not for you, Tom, but for me, it's hard to look back and kind of see to remember, what I knew and what I didn't. There was always music playing at my house growing up. My dad is a guitar player, and so I think I was just kind of knew of Led Zeppelin, but I don't remember, it was never like, this is my parents' band, or this is something that was played at our house, a lot. So vaguely familiar.
I just don't recall ever being aware of them. I mean, in the way that you were aware of, say, the Beatles or Aerosmith or something like that. The only childhood mention I can remember of Led Zeppelin is in the film Wayne's World, when he says Led Zeppelin didn't write songs everybody liked. They left that to the Bee Gees. And I thought that was funny because I liked Wayne's World, but I didn't understand the joke at all. But other than that, I was completely unaware of Led Zeppelin until probably high school. I knew Stairway to Heaven existed, but I had no idea what it even sounded like. You just
knew the name.
I just knew that it was supposedly this legendary rock song, but there was, short of buying it, there was no means of hearing it back then,
Gotcha.
Which, of course, we will go on to give contextual clues of how old we are as well.
Right, right. Well, I think it's interesting now when you mentioned knowing this as a child. This is interesting to me as a parent now because my kids absolutely know Led Zeppelin, but anytime there's music playing and I say to them, what band is this? I'm quizzing them always, right? What band is this? What band is this? Even if it's not Led Zeppelin, it could be like, Taylor Swift's latest hit. Their number one guess is always, is this Led Zeppelin? Is this Led Zeppelin? Because they know that I'm such a fan. So it's funny to me. So my kids will definitely say down the road,
yeah,
oh yeah, we listen to Led Zeppelin all the time at our house.
A couple more points I wanted to make up top. First of all, I mean, what a great band name. I really think it's just fun to say. It's, it invokes certain imagery, partially because I think their first album cover actually had a Zeppelin on it. But yeah, it's just, I think it's a great band name. I'll also say, I think there's sort of this unwavering feeling that John Bonham is arguably the greatest drummer ever. So I'll reveal, I am a drummer myself. Nowhere near as good as John Bonham.
Are you claiming you are the world's greatest drummer and John Bonham is not?
I'm not. No, he far exceeds. I mean, the man has an incredible right foot. Like, I would never take that away from him. Mm-hmm. I don't really like how he plays drums overall. I think he's a little overbearing. But more than that, I've found that throughout most of their catalog, I don't know if it's the mastering, if it's how they mic his drum sets. I don't really like how his drums sound. They're very, overpowering in a way for a lot of their recordings. It's kind of hard for me to describe. I'll try better as we get to the various albums and find instances of it. Mm-hmm. But I'm not wild just about how the drums sound. I think of it kind of like when Nirvana did In Utero. They worked with a different producer than they had for the previous album, and they made sort of this conscious decision to turn the drums up really, really loud. And I just hate the way it sounds. And that's the closest kind of equivalent I can think of to kind of how Led Zeppelin sounds.
Yeah, did the same with lots and lots of mics on those drums. So, yep, makes sense. So. Well, why don't we kick this off? Let's see. Let's talk about these albums. You go ahead. Kick it off. Led Zeppelin 1. You mentioned
Led Zeppelin 1. So Led Zeppelin 1 came out in early 1969, and this is actually an album that I've never owned in any format ever.
You're missing out.
Yeah, I am. It's baffling. I can't believe I never owned this album. But I also can't believe that their first album was this good, especially considering how young they were at the time. I mean, I think Robert Plant and John Bonham I don't even think they were 21 when this album came out.
He was like 19 when they
Which is
formed.
crazy.
Robert Plant was when they formed, yeah.
Yeah, because this is so good. The production, other than, the drum stuff, the drum stuff isn't that noticeable on this album, I feel like, in terms of, the overbearing drums. I don't have anything bad to say about this album. This is a great album. Good Times, Bad Times is such an awesome opener. And just legendary tracks, Communication Breakdown. And I was familiar with all the songs on it because I had various compilations and live albums and things like that. I just never owned the first CD. And that's really a shame looking back on it, because I think when I was a kid, though, I was kind of drawn to their nerdier, mystical stuff. I didn't like the blues as much. And now that's definitely the parts of their catalog that I tend to gravitate towards.
Yeah. The bluesy songs are definitely my favorite. All this stuff that they ripped off from all these uncredited people before them, right? That we mentioned in our opening. But that's definitely the Led Zeppelin that I enjoy. Is a lot of the older stuff, the bluesier stuff, and the songs where you really can see some of that musical talent come through. Not just it's not just loud. It's not just like a layer on top of layer on top of layer, but you see that talent really coming through. That's what I enjoy, and I see a lot of that in One for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. They were already remarkably accomplished songwriters. Again, they're taking liberties with copyright infringement notwithstanding. They understood, I think, what made a good song. I look at the track like "Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You," and there's just nothing that sounded like that at that time. I mean, 1969 is still the very early days of what I think we would consider like hard rock, or sort of the what would become heavy metal and things like that. And so you just listen to that. That track is intense, and that album has a lot of intense moments.
Yep, absolutely. Moving on to Two, right? Which is also this whole funny naming convention that we have. We have Led Zeppelin 2 now. This album was recorded not too long after, in 1969, over several months, as they're on tour. So they're touring to promote One, they're recording Two. I read an interesting kind of interview recently, and it mentioned, and I had never thought of this concept before, it mentioned them recording little snippets as they're on tour, traveling, and they're taking all these tapes with them on their travels, right? This isn't like digital, we're going to record and put it on the cloud, and then, they're hauling these physical, tapes around with them recording. Wow. So this one was a couple months, to record, and definitely, to me, I think Two was even harder as far as like heavy, hard rock and roll, heavier than One. And I think in some ways that's good, and in some ways that's bad. Tom and I listened to all these albums kind of, I don't know about you, Tom, but I listened to all these albums kind of straight through in preparation for this. And it was like going from One to Two, it felt like Two was kind of like, well, they said like, well, One was successful, let's just crank it up a little bit more. And I think some of that, like I said, some of that talent and kind of the musical ability is lost when they crank it up and push it a little bit heavier in Two. But maybe that's just me. So I enjoy Two, but it kind of seemed like they're just trying to be loud and trying to be heavy just for the sake of being heavy at this point.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think Two is a step back for them. And again, I think the prevailing attitude on Two is that it took the Led Zeppelin formula and improved upon it. Widely considered to be an all-time classic. And it's got some great moments on it. But it's also got a lot of things that I wouldn't normally choose to listen to. I really don't care for Whole Lotta Love. It's got a great opening riff. It's iconic. It's one of their all-time most popular songs. I cannot stand the part when he pulls out the bow and starts doing like that weird bow. I don't even know what you call it. What do you call it when you're moving a
Yeah.
bow back and forth? Whatever. I don't care for that. Like, I'd rather just hear him play a regular guitar solo.
Right.
I also really don't like Moby Dick. Again, I'm a drummer. It's got a killer riff. They could have built that riff into an awesome song. Mm-hmm. That is the most boring drum solo I've ever heard in my life. Like, it sounds like he's supposed to be sort of this hard-nosed, like,
Yeah.
overbearing drummer, and that drum solo, it's like da, 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 da. It sounds like the opening to River of Dreams by Billy Joel. You know, like I don't under.
At the time, do you think it was like, wow, this is like, whoa, you know? We have so many other things to compare it to after.
Yeah. I do think there was probably a novelty at the time. Like, we are, such accomplished musicians that we're going to have an entire track of drum solo. I don't think it was a good experiment. I really like the track Living Loving Maid. I think that's the best song on the album.
Really?
Wasn't a hit or anything like, or released as
No.
a single. It's got a neat riff. It's short, but yeah, I think that's a great one. But yeah, a solid album.
Yeah.
What's your favorite track on the album?
Well, I agree that I like Whole Lotta Love. I think it's a great opener for the album. A lot of good stuff there, but yeah, I know that they enjoyed writing these longer songs, not being kind of limited to like a 2 or 3 minute jukebox track. I think Led Zeppelin is kind of known for some of these longer 5, 6, 7 minute tracks on every album. But some parts of Whole Lotta Love, I'm like, this can move on. Let's wrap it up, guys. So, that one's good.
Yeah.
I do like Ramble On. I don't know if that's
I
kind
forgot.
of like, I don't know if that's, too popular to say that
No.
that's one of my favorite tracks, but I do enjoy Ramble On a lot. 2 doesn't really have a lot of my favorite tracks on there, so I'm gonna stick with those 2. Whole Lotta Love, Ramble On.
No, I'm glad you brought up Ramble On. Ramble On is a good tune, and the band feels like a cohesive unit on it. They're all, they seem to be locked in with one another, and yeah, I think that's a great tune. So I guess that will bring us to the following year, 1970, and Led Zeppelin 3, which was something of a transitional album for them. They started to experiment a little bit with sort of a folkier sound. I think Led Zeppelin 3 is a really good album. I think from what I've read at the time, critical reception was fairly mixed. I didn't read sort of what the contemporary feeling on it is. But I think it showed their range a little bit. It showed that they didn't want to be pigeonholed into just doing blues and hard rock for their whole career. Couple of issues with this album. First of all, the studio version of the Immigrant Song is horrible. They have some live versions of that song that are unbelievable. It goes about 10, 15 beats per minute faster live. They throw in guitar solos, and it's so intense. It feels like you're these Vikings who are, going on this rampage, but I don't get that from the studio version at all.
Yeah, that Immigrant Song has never been one of my favorites, so that one, I could skip that one, and maybe I'll have to check out the live version and see if that does it for me, but I don't know if it's just, again, it's too popular or what, but not a big fan there. I enjoy, again, the bluesier side of things. Since I've Been Loving You, I enjoy that. However, that drum pedal that you can hear all through Since I've Been Loving You, I cannot hear anything other than that, and it makes me twitchy when I hear that song. But I enjoy that. I enjoy Tangerine, which, like you mentioned, departure from their kind of heavier side of things. And for my own personal, hats off to Harper. Don't really enjoy the song. I do enjoy the song title. That's my oldest daughter's name. So just a fun little nod there. But three's a fine album. I would put 2 and 3 on the same plane for myself.
Interesting. The other big issue for me on this album is that it felt like they had all these great ideas, for songs, but they didn't know how to end a song at that time. And at that stage in their career, I just felt like if they didn't know how to end it, they were just like, all right, Robert, just say "oh yeah" for 60 to
wail.
90 seconds,
Yeah,
and we'll
yeah,
choose
yeah.
a time to fade.
Yeah.
He would just Celebration Day. He does it. Out on the Tiles, they have an awkward ending. So they just had a hard time ending songs at this point in their career, and so that kind of bothers me.
Well, they're cranking out these albums so
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah,
that maybe they don't have time. It's like we got to get more tracks down here. We got to go. Like just be done. You know, they don't
But
have
it-
time to really flush it out.
it kills me because like some of their ideas on these songs are just great. Like that solo that he does on Celebration Day is unbelievable. But then they get to that last minute of the song, and I skip it. You know, and
Yeah.
the other one I wanted to highlight real quick was the Bronrar Stomp. I think it's pronounced Bronrar. Perhaps our Welsh listeners in the comments could correct us if I'm butchering it, but that's such a cool track, and there's really nothing else in their catalog that's like it. But Jimmy Page, I feel like, doesn't often showcase his acoustic guitar playing kind of like that. Sometimes he'll have an acoustic part in another song, or Tangerine or something like that. But he's almost doing like an acoustic guitar style that I would associate with Dave Matthews later on, where he's using it almost like a percussive instrument in a way at certain parts.
Right.
But what a neat song. I love that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear them do, again, something different and kind of take it in a new direction. So, yeah, really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on. 1, 2, 3. You would think we would have 4. No, we have Untitled, which we all just call 4 anyway. There we go. Very nice. Yes, with their little icons. This one, the best-selling Led Zeppelin album ever, is 4, featuring the number 1, everyone's most favorite Led Zeppelin song, Stairway to Heaven. Not actually my favorite Led Zeppelin song at all. I really don't. I never listen to Stairway to Heaven. I skip it always. But yeah, 4 for me. Misty Mountain Hop I enjoy. Going to California I enjoy. My favorite Led Zeppelin song of all time, When the Levee Breaks, is the closer on 4, and I just love that is the wrap up and just a great, great song. So that's, if When the Levee Breaks wasn't on 4, I could totally do without it. But When the Levee Breaks kind of redeems it for me. What about you?
So this was my first Led Zeppelin album. This is the album that I bought when I was 15. And it's so hard because it's such a classic, and it's so hard to listen to it with fresh ears. And Stairway in particular, it's really hard to listen to it and not just think about it as sort of this classic, I could do with never hearing the first 4 minutes of Stairway again, but I gotta say, I mean, I think the guitar solo still holds up incredibly well.
Oh yeah.
And sort of that outro, I think is a really still really sounds great, and timeless. I think as an album, it's bookended by some really strong tracks, and Black Dog still the riff to Black Dog is incredible. Another song that they don't know how to end, which is a shame because it's such a good song.
Yeah.
They deserve to give it a proper ending.
What do you
but
think?
Gosh.
What do you think about Bonham's drumming on Rock and Roll?
I don't like Rock and Roll as a song. I think it's just this sort of generic, and I think the drum solo at the end is boring and pointless. Like the song would be stronger without the. The rhythm that he does in the song is neat. The drum part is neat. I certainly couldn't play it. The song as a whole just doesn't do it for me. Battle
It's
of
like
Evermore is. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say Rock and Roll is like 2 steps back from being kind of like doo-woppy, which they get
Yes.
into they
Yeah.
get into later. But if you listen to it, you can kind of hear if they just pushed it a little bit more in that direction, it would turn into kind of like a rockabilly doo-wop kind of thing, which I hadn't recognized until recently, and now I'm like, oh, I don't like that song even more now because now that's all I hear. So yeah.
It's too bad because like Jimmy Page's solo on that song is fabulous. He really outdoes himself on that solo, but the song itself is just Battle of Evermore is just unlistenable. Like, what a terrible song. I do not like Misty Mountain Hop. The verse, just that sort of atonal verse, is just kind of nails on a chalkboard for me. But it's got that cool halftime part, so I like that. Four Sticks is meh, but there's a really good Henry Rollins cover of it. You should check that out. And like you said, When the Levee Breaks. I mean, that's a top 5 Zeppelin song as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Just a great track. It's a song where John Bonham's style of drumming is kind of what makes it what it is. That's really the song I feel like he was born to play. Yeah, I could never say a bad thing about that song. Just a classic song. Mm-hmm. Which brings us to 1973 and Houses of the Holy. So I'll start here. This is an all-timer for me, not just as a Led Zeppelin album. There was a time in my life where I would have told you that this was my all-time favorite album.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's not anymore, but I still adore this album. Just a fabulous album. I bought it in February of 1999 in London, and I listened to it on a Sony Discman on the second level of a double-decker bus, which was uncovered, and it was like 25 degrees. And I sat there shivering, listening to this amazing album that was just blowing my mind the entire time.
In London.
Yeah.
What a cool experience.
Yeah, and Dancing Days, absolutely my favorite track. Stone Temple Pilots also does a really good cover of it. But not a weak... I take that back. I almost said not a weak track on the single album, but I'm going to let you share your thoughts, and then I'm going to come back and tell you the only part of this album that I don't
The only
enjoy.
one you don't like?
Yes.
I like Rain Song on this. I like that kind of like mellow, like the mellow start and then the build. And that one is actually one that I enjoy, like the build. Robert Plant does more wailing on that one, but it's kind of somehow okay to me in that specific track. Dancing Days, great track, like you said. No Quarter is fun. I like No Quarter. Dire Maker. What do you think about Dire Maker, Tom?
That's the one weak spot on this. I cannot stand that song. I skip it every time.
I think it's a fun track, but then I also listen to it and I'm like, I don't know, sometimes it just rubs me the wrong way and I can't kind of put my finger on it, but I do think it's like it has kind of a fun sound to it.
Yeah, and I like them sometimes when they're having fun. I like the crunge. They're obviously having fun on the crunge.
Yeah.
And killer bass line. And I don't know, I kind of enjoy that song. He's kind of doing like a James Brown type of thing, and I enjoy that. But there's just something about Dire Maker that just rubs me the wrong way. I don't like that one.
Probably a lot of people. I feel like that's one of the more popular or more well-known Zeppelin songs that then also has fewer people enjoy, if that makes sense, right? Like it's known like Stairway or Rock and Roll, but then you have people who are like, no, we don't really like that one. It's, so.
Yeah. You mentioned the Rain Song, and I just wanted to take a moment to, what a great song that is. And it's like 7 minutes long, and there is not a wasted second on the entire song. Like every single sound on that track is there for a reason. And they're finally figuring out how to end songs, because the end of that song, like that chord they resolve to, is like so perfect. And you just think, man, I knew they had it in them. It
only took them, what are we at, 4 or 5 years here into the whole experiment to get it. Yeah, yep. Well, then we move on to Physical Graffiti, this nice long double album. This was released on Swan Song, which was their own album, first album for that. When they first put this album together, they had like 70 or 80 minutes worth of tracks. Not quite enough for a double album, but not enough to, nothing to cut to bring it back. So they kind of threw in some extra tracks onto that album. I enjoy Physical Graffiti. I think this has a lot of like middle of the road tracks that I like. There's not so many that I can't stand and not so many that I adore. So it kind of balances it out, right? Like this is one that I can put on and just listen to the whole way through and not feel like I gotta turn this off. This is terrible. Kashmir is on this one. Kashmir is my favorite of all of the well-known Zeppelin songs. That's the one I actually will listen to and tolerate. Let me think. What else do we have on here? Boogie with Stu. Dad's name is Stu. That always made me laugh. So, good album, but none of those are like my top tracks. But I do enjoy this overall as a good, solid album.
Yeah. I'm with you. And I think the most amazing thing to me about this album is that they have this double album, and it has the least amount of filler, in my opinion, of any Led Zeppelin album. And it's a bloated double album. It should be half filler, but
Right.
they have so many good songs on this album. Right. Two of my favorite all-time Led Zeppelin songs are off this album, Night Flight and 10 Years Gone, which 10 Years Gone is such a touching, just incredible song. But Night Flight's a lot of fun. I always enjoyed that one too. In the Light's a great song. That's really as much of a prog rock type of song as Led Zeppelin ever got.
Right.
Down by the Seaside almost feels like a Steely Dan song, so that's great.
That one I could toss out. Down by the Seaside is not for me.
So I think they're developing a lot of neat, like, contemporary influences.
Yeah.
They're stealing from their
changing,
contemporaries
right?
for a change. I don't know. I think there's a lot more just subtlety on this album, and it's interesting to me that this sort of bloated double album is where they learned restraint, which seems ironic, and maybe there's hope for us all.
Well, you do, keep working at it long enough, and eventually you get it right. Maybe they just kind of hit it right, or maybe they cut the wrong. Houses of the Holy is on, not on Houses of the Holy. Houses of the Holy is on. The track is on Physical Graffiti.
I love that.
They cut the wrong tracks from the wrong albums, and maybe they just happened to put them all together in Physical Graffiti, and it kind of came together.
Yeah.
Like a happy coincidence. So, no, but a good, solid album. I enjoy this
Absolutely. When I said that there was hope for us all, I was kidding, because up next is Presents. And not the kind that Santa brings you. The March 1976 Led Zeppelin album. 13 months after Physical Graffiti. They put out a double album, and 13 months later they were like, hey, let's put out another album with 7 songs that nobody wants to hear.
Yeah, let's just throw this together, and they're all kind of starting to battle some demons, right? By this point, and
clearly
that's caught up with them. This one, total throwaway for me. I don't think there's. I mean, T for One I enjoy. I think that's kind of a cool track, but I could do without it. If I never had to hear Presence again, and I would have sacrificed that one as part of the deal, fine, take it. It's fine.
Yeah. I like For Your Life, track 2. That's a pretty good song. Hot's On for Nowhere and Nobody's Fault But Mine are both fine. Achilles' Last Stand.
Nobody's Fault But Mine. I enjoy that kind of, again, the bluesy rock.
Yeah.
But then, like, Robert, shut up. We're just wailing again. Can I have, like, the guitar? Can we make it an instrumental and just cut out Robert Plant? And then I would enjoy that, I think, a lot more.
Achilles' Last Stand. That is the hardest track in the Led Zeppelin catalog for me to get through. 10 minutes, and it's just a chore. Which is a shame, because it's got some interesting ideas. The opening riff, I think, is really good. And then that that's cool too. 10 minutes.
Yeah, just buried among all of the other kind of pointlessness.
And I have no idea what he's singing about. I've never had the patience to like try and decipher it.
No.
Just a chore of a song. Apparently, from what I've read, they had to cancel their 1975 tour, much of it, because Robert Plant got into a car accident and was recuperating, so they decided to make the most of their time and record another album. Also, they were tax exiles at the time, which apparently was true of all these British bands back in the 70s and maybe even the 80s too. And it's just a concept that is totally lost on me, and I always enjoy reading about that.
Just let's skip town. We'll go to Sweden. That's
right.
Where they ended up when they were recording the next album, Into the Outdoor. And you know, that tax exile will come back later as we talk about Coda, but left and went to Sweden, recorded Into the Outdoor in a quick 3 weeks. Like you want to talk about throwing an album together, this one they threw together. Again, you know, I think they probably should have hung up their hat an album or two before. We have the fan favorite Hot Dog on this album. What? No. I do appreciate Fool in the Rain. I think that's a fun song. The beat is great there and just kind of is like, you know, it's just like a fun tap your toe kind of song. But the rest of it, I could do without In Through the Outdoor.
So, I actually quite like this album. I think this is way better than Presence. My one qualm with it is Robert Plant's voice is really suffering on this album, which is interesting to me because I think in his 80s work, his solo albums, his voice sounds much better. Like it really improves from here and gets back to sounding closer to what it sounded like before. So I don't know what he was going through vocal-wise at the time, but every song they recorded for these sessions, he really sounds like he's struggling.
Well, this is 1979 by now when they record Into the Outdoor, so a little bit of time has passed. Maybe he's been taking some time off and is not as on it as he was before, you know, when they were doing all these back-to-back albums.
Yeah. I like Fool in the Rain a lot. John Bonham's drumming on that is excellent, although I feel obligated to point out he is doing the Purdy Shuffle, which was invented by Bernard Purdy of Steely Dan fame and many other bands. But it's a great track. His fills are excellent. Everybody's doing a great job on that song. They sound like they're having fun, even though from what I know about that period of their lives, they probably were not.
Sure. Well, shortly after recording, right, they recorded Into the Outdoor and then lost John Bonham after that. So that definitely was not a high point in their career. That was really a lot of John Paul Jones and Robert Plant.
Oh, very much.
Effort for Into the Outdoor.
Very much. And I did want to say that Carousel Ombra is also 10 minutes, but it's much easier to get through than Achilles' Last Stand. And All My Love is also a very moving track, of course, about the death of Robert Plant's son. Great song, though. And, this maybe isn't the highest note for a band of this caliber to go out on, but I think it's a much more quality album than Presence. They left a couple of tracks off, which we're going to get to, and I'm not going to say more, but baffling decisions there.
You think?
Some of them, yeah.
Well, that Coda.
Oh, Coda's me.
Coda
Sorry.
Zone. Yeah.
Coda's me. So Wearing and Tearing. My God, how do they leave Wearing and Tearing off of In Through the Outdoor? Because for me, that's a top 5 Led Zeppelin song. And I feel like I've probably said that for about 7 or 8 songs at this point. But Wearing and Tearing is such a fabulous track. It really showcases Bonham, what his strengths are as a drummer. He's got that quick foot. It's got a great beat and just a just shows them still coming up with new ideas. It doesn't sound like anything else in their catalog, in my opinion. And I think it kind of showcases the future of what I think Led Zeppelin would have sounded like in the 80s. And when I hear it, it does make me sad, that the band ended where they did, because I think they still had a lot of mileage in them. But the rest of Coda, I'm not going to talk about it. The rest of it's, the other Into the Outdoor tracks are fine. Darlene and Ozone Baby, the rest of it, I don't have any use for.
Well, Coda, they threw together. You mentioned their little tax travels, right? They're traveling all around. Coda, they threw together to try and raise some money to pay off those tax debts. So this may or may not even have been on their 5-year plan, right? John Bonham has passed at this point, and it's just kind of like we need to scrape something together to bring in the last of our money that we can kind of round up. So.
Right.
But Coda for me, I'm not interested in listening to Coda. I don't even know if I had listened to it before preparing for this, and I doubt I will listen to it again.
You're missing out on Wearing and Tearing.
I'll listen to
classic.
Wearing and Tearing. Just keep sending me Wearing and Tearing. Check this track out. Just keep sending it, and I'll give it a courtesy listen every now and then. But
I appreciate that.
The album as a whole, no.
I do want to say, since they're essentially compiling outtakes and such, I cannot believe they didn't put Hey Hey What Can I Do on Coda, because that's the best Led Zeppelin song that's ever gotten left off an album. Awesome. I mean, it was recorded for the Led Zeppelin 3 sessions. There are multiple tracks they could have left off Led Zeppelin 3 in favor of that one. So that one's always been a baffling decision to me. They also have like a live version of I Can't Quit You, Babe. Why would they not throw on
You, Girl?
Yeah, why would they not have thrown on like Travelin' Riverside Blues or some other like awesome live track?
Right.
I don't know.
On your Immigrant Song track with the tempo changes, that would have been maybe better received. So
it's a good idea. Well, I think that does it for our album by album journey, which brings us to what will be an enduring staple on this show, and that is a little something we call Top 3, Bottom 1. And what we do, we rank our top 3 albums and our bottom 1 album. And so, Adrienne, do you have your top 3 and your bottom 1 prepared?
Top 3 was very hard for me because I like a lot of these albums. I do have mine. Tom, why don't you... Do you want to give us yours first, or do you want me to... I want to hear yours first, Tom.
All right, you want to hear my number 3?
I do want to hear your number 3.
Number 3 was tough. The top 2 was not tough. Number 3 was tough. Led Zeppelin 1 is my number 3 album. I just... Like I said, maybe it's because I came to it later in life, and so it still has this sort of fresh sound that a lot of their catalog does not for me. But it's one that I find myself listening to pretty regularly nowadays.
Good. Do you want to...
Number 3 for you.
For me? Number 3 for me, I think, is Physical Graffiti, for the reasons that I said before. It's a great album that I can just put on and enjoy the whole way through, and nothing is really too off-putting on there that I feel like turning it off. And it's, being a double album, it packs a big punch, right? So that's also good for me. So I think number 3, Physical Graffiti, for sure.
So I have Physical Graffiti number 2. Just loaded album. So many great songs, which I already mentioned. It really holds up, and they tried so many different things in terms of experimenting with their sound, and I think almost all of those experiments on that album were successful.
Well, my number 2, I have a feeling where this may end up for you, but my number 2, Houses of the Holy. Great song, a lot of strong tracks. I enjoy that one a lot. And this was really hard for me. 2 and 3, I went back and forth on 2 and 3 because so many of these albums, there's probably, like 3 or 4 of them that I could have put in that 2 or 3 spot. But as of today, I'm going to say Houses of the Holy is number 2.
All right. Well, House of the Holy is number one for me.
Yeah.
Like I said, just an incredibly formative album for me as a teenager, and has always remained a favorite throughout my life since then. Just so many great tracks. Like I said, Dancing Days is way up there for me. I can't believe we didn't talk about Over the Hills and Far Away. What another great classic Led Zeppelin song. But yeah, a near perfect album with the exception of Dire Maker.
Very good. Well, my number one is number one. I love that, that like fresh album when they first hit the scene. They're not trying all of these other new things or trying to outdo themselves in subsequent albums. I really enjoy that kind of that first strong rock and roll album with that blues tie-in. Even if they ripped off half of the album from other artists, number one is definitely one that I go back to quite often and enjoy a lot of that album.
It's a great choice. So we had the same top three, just in different
Just
orders.
Shuffled around a little bit. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's awesome. I'm sure that will not be a frequent occurrence, but
No, probably not.
but
Is
we'll
that
see.
because so many of the tail end of these albums are so terrible? The end of their career is so terrible. For me, like Presence, In Through the Outdoor Coda, those were not even in consider. That's like number. They could have been 75, 76, 77 on the list. They're so far down there.
Well, that brings us to bottom one, and
Bottom one, yeah. Bottom
I
one
guess
for
I'm in-
me. Well,
Go ahead.
I kind of maybe you could guess. Bottom one for
Yes.
me is Coda. I'm just like I want nothing to do with it. When Tom and I were talking through this setup, Tom's like, and we'll talk about Coda, and I'm like, no, what? No, we won't. It's just kind of a throwaway album for me. So Coda, done with it.
bottom one is Presence. I thought about Coda, and ultimately, I feel like I have to own Coda because it's got Wearing and Tearing on it. Presence does not have any song on it that I want to hear as much as I want to hear Wearing and Tearing. So I had to put it at the bottom. And it's a listenable album. And the interesting thing is I did read some of the contemporary reviews on it, and people have kind of come around on it, it seems. I think the prevailing opinion is that it's bad for a Led Zeppelin album, but for most bands, this would be considered probably their best album. And that may be true, but it's just not an album I want to throw on very often.
Yeah. Well, speaking of throwing on an album, Tom, you got it on vinyl? I would love
That's right.
to hear which of these albums. Tom is a vinyl collector. We are vinyl collectors at our house. Would love to hear which of these albums you have on vinyl.
Well, I have polar opposites. I have Houses of the Holy, my all-time favorite Led Zeppelin album, and I have Presence. For some reason, I don't know what. I don't know if you remember this, but probably like 5-6 months ago, I was really trying to convince you that Presence had some sort of redeeming qualities to it. And I believed it so much that I spent $15 on a copy of Presence.
Oof, that's tough. Well, are you ready for this? I have my stack right here.
Wait. Let me ask.
Oh.
Adrian,
Yeah.
you got it on vinyl?
Oh, do I have it on vinyl? We have one. We have two. We have three, which three is an interesting vinyl. Some of these are interesting vinyl. So we have three. Three is your typical, like, nice gatefold, right? Usually there's an album in here and an album in here.
Mm-hmm.
But this one is not an album. This is a. Can you see this? Do you see what is happening here? Yes.
That's so cool.
All these random photos. I think that's Robert Plant, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, this held up the release of this album several months. This slowed them down. So there's three. I have Untitled 4.
Mm-hmm.
I have Houses of the Holy, which my
Oh,
children
yeah.
always ask about these naked children. We have Physical Graffiti. This is my favorite of the album covers because Physical Graffiti, you don't know this if you buy a Target reissue these days, but oh no, I can't get it out of here. Let's see. Oh, I put it away wrong. Physical graffiti, the words that say physical graffiti there in the windows, you can read that this says physical graffiti. This is actually just an insert, and the sleeves that you can see where we have the cutouts here, the sleeves that have the albums, the LPs in them have all these other random photos. I don't think, they probably weren't random at the time. I'm sure they're real people, but don't ask me who all these little people are. But you can put in whoever you want. Oh, there's Robert Plant again. Yeah, so there's Robert Plant there, maybe. So you can put all these people in here into the physical graffiti sleeve. So pretty cool thing. This
That's pretty
album was
cool.
also delayed because of this. So maybe they should stop trying to make cutesy album covers. And then I have, unfortunately, presents on
Yes.
vinyl. But this was only $5, not $15. So my
$5,
lovely
wow.
husband, when we said we were going to do this podcast and we decided we were doing Led Zeppelin for the first album, first band, he graciously bought presents for me, not knowing that I would despise it. So, Andy, we appreciate you for doing that. But that's my vinyl collection for Led Zeppelin, and those get a lot of play at our house. We have a lot of vinyl. There's stuff that sits on the shelf, but the Zepp definitely gets pulled out.
Well, I'm kind of shocked you don't have In Through the Outdoor, because I would think, knowing Andy being the completist that he is,
Yeah,
I guess there's always
don't
something
give him
else to buy.
ideas.
Yeah.
In Through the Outdoor, though, I think is interesting because if you see the cover, those, this black and, depending on which cover you're looking at, because there are variations, it doesn't scream Led Zeppelin, right? Like these scream Led
Right.
Zeppelin.
Right.
So I feel like I see people pass that one up in the record store because they don't know what it is.
I'm sure that's why they're passing it up in the records.
And as a benefit to themselves. They don't know they're doing themselves a favor by not
Right.
knowing what that cover
Right.
is when they pass it up. Absolutely.
So we also have our wild card question, which I came up with for this one. So I'll ask you first. Adrian, if you could have seen Led Zeppelin in any year, even prior to your birth, well, I guess it would have to be prior to our births, what year would you have seen Led Zeppelin?
I would have seen them, I think, probably in like 72, 73, after they've put out 1, 2, 3, and 4, with the hopes of seeing When the Levee Breaks in concert and some of those kind of my favorite tracks. I am not seeing them later on when I might get Hot Dog as a part of the show. No need for that. So yeah, I would want to see them early in their career, but late enough that several albums have passed. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, their early recordings are so good. All their live at the BBC stuff is excellent. But I'm going to go 73. They did a huge North American tour in 73. I've looked at all the dates they've played numerous times because that's the kind of thing that I do.
Tom, do you know where you would have seen them?
I'm glad you asked. I would have seen them at the Hampton Coliseum in Hampton, Virginia, because I spent some of my formative years in that area, and I have that venue has sentimental value. So yeah, I would have seen them at Hampton Coliseum. I don't know the date, unfortunately, that they played there in 73, but that's the one I would have gone to.
Well, maybe you should see if you can track down the set list and put it together and listen.
It's
to
on
it at some
Wikipedia.
point. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
So, any final thoughts on Led Zeppelin that you would like to share, Adrian?
Final thoughts. I think that Led Zeppelin deserves the, notwithstanding kind of all of this borrowing that they've done from, they get a lot of flack for all this kind of borrowing from other musicians that they've done. But I think they really do deserve their recognition as one of the greatest rock and roll bands of all time. I appreciate their music, and I think it's really interesting. As much as the later stuff is not my cup of tea, I do enjoy that you can kind of see growth and see change, and they're not just doing the same songs 10 years, 10 years down the road, that there is some kind of variation there. But yeah, great band, big fan, and I'll I will pull these records out and listen to them probably next week.
Yeah, one point that I didn't make up top was I think they're probably the most influential band of what became 80s hard rock and metal. I mean, all those bands were clearly heavily influenced by Led Zeppelin. And even in the 90s, I think Led Zeppelin's influence was still really apparent with a lot of the popular bands.
Even in the 2020, Greta Van Fleet just put out a new album last week, right?
Yes. Who could forget? But I was going to say, I really, we poked a little fun at Led Zeppelin today, but I think we both hold them in very high esteem and consider their body of work to be very impressive. And I really think music today would be better if they continued to be more influential than they are today. Just because I don't see, Greta Van Fleet notwithstanding, I don't see their influence a whole lot in today's music, and I think we're probably poorer for it. So thanks, Led Zeppelin, for all the great music. We really enjoyed giving it a courtesy listen. And Adrian, do you want to describe kind of how we're going to pick bands going forward, what our mechanism is for doing that?
Absolutely. So Tom and I chose Led Zeppelin together, and we, like we mentioned, we have some shared musical tastes. We have some different tastes in music, and so we really want to explore some of these different things, not just bands that we both enjoy, but maybe things that are new to one of us, or maybe that we don't even enjoy that much and really have to give a courtesy listen to. So we chose this one together. Tom is going to be choosing our next band. I will choose after that, and the pattern will continue as such. So Tom, the moment you've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Episode 2. What are we courtesy listening to?
Well, and you're being a good sport, Adrian. It's supposed to be a surprise, and I blurted it out, weeks ago. We are going to do Stone Temple Pilots. They are one of my all-time favorite bands. Of course, I'll go into that in much greater detail during the next episode, but very much looking forward to it. Adrian, this has been so much fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Stone Temple Pilots too. I've heard all their radio tracks. I'm sure that there will be plenty more. If you ask me now to name a song or two, I don't know if I could do that, but I'm sure I will recognize them. And I know how much they mean to you. So that, I think has something as well to add to that. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm glad we dove into these albums. I'm looking forward to future episodes.
Me too. And most importantly, you need to do better than I did, and you need to actually keep the topic for episode 3 a secret, so that we get some genuine surprise during our next episode.
Maybe I'll make the decision on the spot.
That would certainly guarantee
surprise myself as well.
Yeah.
Sounds
okay.
good.
Well,
all right.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Courtesy Listen.